Hey, brother,
Hey Al.
and welcome everyone back to another episode of Siblings in Crime. I'm Allie Murphy, or Rossell. That was weird.
And I'm Blake Murphy.
And just as it sounds, we are siblings who love true crime. We are zooming once again, so sorry if the quality is not as good. We're figuring out the audio, figuring out the video. We're never in the same state these days, so it's been a little more difficult recording, but we're still trying to get these out. So thanks for bearing with us. Before we go into this week's case, how was your week?
My week was great. It was kind of like nothing really happened, I don't think. But we did have a homeless guy break into one of our properties and started damaging some stuff. So
No way.
yeah, but we locked it down pretty good now. So hopefully he didn't break in again. He also pooped in a plastic bag, so at
Ew.
least he kept it in a bag. But
Ew, that is disgusting.
yeah,
That's so sad. And that's in Phoenix?
yeah, that one's in Phoenix. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
Mhm.
sad. Well, I'm glad you got that figured out. That's disgusting.
Mhm.
Well, this week was Easter. You were in Iowa working,
Yeah, I
right?
got back like midday
Yeah,
on.
I was the opposite. We did all of our Easter stuff Saturday with my in-laws, which was super fun. They do the egg hunt, all that stuff. And then um on actual Easter, me and Brett kind of celebrated in the morning, but then I flew in the afternoon and I didn't get back until like midnight. So super fun way to spend Easter. But it was nice making last week a little special with Holy Week, and we try to focus on like each day of the week, which was really fun. But that's really all I had going on.
Nice.
Yeah,
That sounds like a good week.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this.
Hmm.
Okay, picture it.
Okay.
You're in the woods.
All right.
Would
I'm
you
in the
rather
woods.
be alone or with a complete stranger?
Complete stranger.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't know anything about this person.
Yeah. It's
You're just
just
scared to
me.
be by yourself.
I'd rather be with someone I don't know than by myself.
I guess that makes sense. You literally need somebody to go with you to the gas station. I can't
I
imagine you
don't
being
need
okay.
someone. I like to have people go with me.
I just think it's funny. Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Okay, well that makes sense. I still don't know how I feel about it. Strangers, I'd be scared, but being alone, I don't know if I could survive by myself. I'm not very aware of the woods. So,
Yeah, you're screwed either way.
yeah, so basically I'm a goner. Well, today's story, we're going to be on the Appalachian Trail. This draws hundreds of thousands of people each year. And these adventures that people go on, they're like chasing solitude, they're chasing healing. I don't know what these people are out there doing. They're hiking, they're loving it.
They're just backpackers.
Yeah, they're
They like
backpack
they're through
adventure.
hikers. I listen to a lot of podcasts
I feel like
about
they're
these
always on the
guys.
Appalachian Trail. You hear crazy
This
things
guy's
out
like the
there.
most famous one. That one, and then I think two other ones are like the biggest ones.
I
And
mean, this trail specifically stretches like 2,200 miles, like
I meant
14 states or something crazy.
yeah. I meant most popular, but
Right.
yeah, like Pacific Crest Trail or something like that is like the other big one. But yeah, Kyle Hates Hiking is great podcast and
Hmm.
YouTube channel if anyone is interested in. He like talks about murder and like mishaps that happen when people are hiking. So it's kind of cool.
Kind of cool. That sounds horrible.
Interesting.
Well, most leave the trail with memories of like foggy mornings, clear night skies, and stars, but a few never leave at all. And so, what if the real danger on the trail isn't the wildlife, isn't the weather, but the people who walk it with you? And this is the story of the man in the woods.
The Man in the Woods.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's roll. May 2008, we're in Dismal Creek, Virginia. The road to nowhere starts just outside Parisburg, Virginia, where pavement turns to gravel, gravel turns to dirt, and the cell signal disappears entirely. That's where Sean Farmer and Scott Johnson wanted to be. These were like old time friends. They've been friends forever. Now they're both in their 30s, bonded by their love of fishing. They love remote places, leaving the world behind, camping. These are those type of guys. Doesn't sound like they had wives, work. Like they were just ditching everything, trying to have guys' time out in the woods. Two
Nice.
guys, two rods, a tent, and trout rich waters of Dismal Creek. So they picked a site near Wapiti Shelter, a few hundred yards off the Appalachian Trail. The area was perfect. It was quiet, remote. They had like the tall, shaded trees with just enough sunlight breaking through. They built a fire. They set up the tent, cracked open a couple beers, cast a few lines. It sounds like this was like their kind of routine vacation, like a weekend away. Scott Johnson had
Solid.
gotten to his location earlier in the day on May 6th to get a jump on fishing. He wasn't but a few hours in when a man and his dog made their way over to where he was fishing. Scott's initial thoughts were like this man looked a bit scraggly, maybe he'd been out in the woods a while, but he had like a really nice camo jacket on. He had new boots. So he couldn't have been like only a wilderness guy. He seemed like he was out there for a while, but I mean, he had new stuff. It wasn't like he was like a homeless man, but he was a
Yeah.
little rough around the edges. This man introduced himself as Ricky Williams, and the two talked and fished together up until it was time to get back to the campsite and meet up with Sean, who at this point he got into the campsite. He was prepping the fire, he's getting the hot dogs ready, he was getting ready for camping. Being friendly, Scott invited Ricky and his dog to join them. So now we have all three men and the dog making their way back to the campsite. As the evening rolled in, they got the fire going strong. They started eating dinner. Although their new friend did seem a little off, they were not the type to overthink it. It seems like these were just like the most friendly guys, and like this guy's kind of weird, but yeah, have dinner with us.
Wait, so the guy did seem off?
Yeah, he just like
Kind of
I guess
strange
off is
fellow.
like a weird word, but it's not like a super natural friendly personality. A little more reserved, a little quieter. Like maybe he's like a little
Kind of like
alone
a normal loner
often.
guy, just like one like quiet and strange.
Yeah. It sounds like he just like a little more social awkwardness.
Socially awkward.
Yeah. I say it in the most unnatural way ever.
Yeah.
That's funny. They had a nice night, evidently. Talked about fishing. They mentioned God a few times, talked about the beauty of the woods and how it made them feel whole. Nothing screamed danger, especially to two grown men, but he was just a little off. As the evening wrapped up, Ricky stood and said he better get back to camp before it gets too dark, which makes sense. He thanked them and stepped into the trees, leaving behind curious men being like, "Where the heck is your camp? What was going on here?"
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's weird. It seems like on the Appalachian Trail, everyone's kind of friendly with each other. Like hikers are helping hikers. Is
Hmm.
that true with the stories you hear?
Yeah, sounds like everyone's friendly. They
Yeah.
all have code names they go by.
What? Really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they're what are they called?
Like
I forget what they're called, but yeah, it's just like everyone will have like a code name, and that's how you introduce yourself.
that's funny. So like if you're well known in the area, you like
Yeah,
get a call sign basically.
yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it seems like everyone is typically very friendly and helpful and everyone joins each other. It seems like it's a whole community. So I'm sure that they didn't think too much of it, but it was just a little bit different than most encounters. And then came a sound. Sean recalls there was a sudden loud boom in his left ear, leaving it ringing. Both men looked up. Ricky was back. He stepped into the firelight and stood there watching them. Then Ricky took a slow step forward, and that's when they saw it. He was holding a 22 caliber gun.
Jeez.
Sean, at 6 foot 4 inches and 325 pounds, staggered but did not collapse as he realized he had just been shot in the side of his head.
Oh wow.
Scott barely had time to move as he realized,
Jeez.
like, as realization crept in, and then that's when the second shot came. The bullet hit Scott in the neck as he turned to run for the trees. As Scott attempted an escape, Ricky turned back to Sean, who undoubtedly was like shooken up. He just got hit by a bullet, and it was
Yeah.
absolutely lodged in his skull.
Ugh.
Regardless, Ricky lifted his gun and sent a third bullet straight into Sean's chest.
Jeez.
Ricky stood over them watching. Maybe he thought they were dead. Maybe he just didn't care. But either way, he wanted out of there just as bad as the victims did. He bent down, grabbed Sean's truck keys, and booked it to the truck. And he disappeared
He
into
just
the
wanted
trees.
his truck. He still wanted to steal the truck or something.
Yeah, that's what, right. So that's what it seems like. So he gets in the truck, and the only thing that's breaking the silence, as everyone's wondering what the heck is going on, is the engine turning over and Ricky making his escape. Then it faded and went down the dirt road away from the campsite. Sean's pain in his chest was obviously unbearable. Scott's neck was soaked in blood. At this point, Scott is making it to the tree line. He was running away. He was making an escape. He's behind trees trying to get cover. And on instinct, knowing he needed to stop the bleeding, he plugged the bullet entry hole with his index finger in his neck.
Ew.
I don't think I could do it.
Well, you probably just have a bunch of adrenaline going.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that right there could have saved his life.
Hmm.
Dazed but alert, he hadn't even realized that he had been shot in the back while he was running to the tree line.
Dang.
So these men are just getting ambushed.
Yeah.
They had just survived two point blank gunshots, but they were still alone deep in the woods with no idea if Ricky was even coming back, what his plan was, what just happened. This was all in the blink of an eye. Sean did not hesitate, though. He grabbed his Jeep keys and bolted for the car. Each breath was fire, each movement sent stabbing pain through his ribs, but he didn't stop.
I
And
thought the other
meanwhile, we
guy
have
got the keys. Bad
Ricky took
guy.
the truck. They drove separate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
so Ricky took the truck while Sean grabbed his own Jeep keys and he's trying to get away as well.
Yeah.
So Sean makes it to the car. Meanwhile, we have Scott who's in the trees and he's in shock and bleeding heavily. He noticed that his
Jeez.
friend took off in the Jeep.
Yeah.
And so he began stumbling to get to the trail to meet him on the dirt road.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's running through the woods, trying to
You
get to the
cut it
dirt.
off, cut him off.
Yeah, to cut him off. They had no plan, no cell phones, no light. They just had this will to live and they were just in pure adrenaline mode.
Jeez.
Somehow, miraculously, Scott did reach the road. And not long after, Sean, still bleeding from his chest, rolled up in the Jeep. So they do meet on the intersecting road, which they
That's
have to know
good.
the area pretty good, I would
Yeah.
assume. They saw each other still alive and reunited at this point. And so Scott jumps in. They take off down this dirt road. I can't imagine the shock and adrenaline. You're with your best friend. You're like, what? You're both bleeding a ton, trying to get to
Yeah.
help.
One shot in the chest and the other one shot in the neck and in the back and in the
Yeah,
head.
and in the head. These are like severe wounds.
Yeah.
All of them, like
And you're
all four,
driving too.
should have
It's like,
been fatal.
yeah.
They drove recklessly, barely able to see straight until they spotted a cabin tucked into the woods. A couple lived there, and the options were either this cabin, which was like 6 miles from where they were, or the hospital that was 40 miles away. So obviously they chose the closer one, and they start stumbling up to this cabin. I imagine how terrifying as the homeowners.
Ah.
I know. I don't know how I'd react. It's like you want to think that you'd be immediately helpful, but how terrifying.
Yeah.
People are rolling up. One can hardly speak. They got shot in the neck. One got shot in the head. And you're there not knowing how to handle the situation. That's terrifying. The homeowners, rightfully so, were hesitant at first, wondering what the heck is going on. But by the wildest coincidence, the resident, her name was Melissa, she actually recognized Sean as one of her friend's ex-boyfriends.
Wow, that's a small
And
world.
I know, super small world. And she's like, oh, that's Sean. Let's help. So they grab towels, they help clean up, they call 911 immediately. And so, of course, helicopters, everyone's coming out to get them. Helicopters were actually the first on the scene and they air vac them out to the nearest hospital. Each man was like within inches of death. Scott recalled actually a paramedic reporting that he didn't have a pulse at one point during the flight to the
That'd be a
hospital.
spooky thing to hear.
I know, which I'm like, also, how'd you hear that if you didn't have a pulse? But that is the most, I can't imagine the panic you're feeling, wondering, like, is this it? But they had done the impossible. They had survived an execution style ambush by a stranger in the middle of nowhere. And neither of them knew it yet, but the man who shot them, Ricky, wasn't just some drifter on the trail. He had done this before and 27 years earlier basically got away with it.
Whoa.
Within hours of Sean and Scott being flown to the hospital, Giles County deputies were on the hunt. The description was simple. This is the most basic man ever. White male, late 50s, scruffy, soft spoken, and had gone by the name Ricky Williams. He had stolen a 2005 blue Chevrolet truck from one of the victims. So they had to be on the lookout for this truck. But that same night, just a few miles from the shooting, police spotted the vehicle crashed into an embankment. There was no driver, no blood, but then just a short distance away, they found him. He was walking along the road, soaked, muddy, and injured, but he was alive. And as soon as deputies ran his name, the entire case turned on its head. This wasn't just a case of a stranger on stranger shooting in the woods. This was literally history repeating itself. So, in order to understand who this man truly was, we're going to rewind 2 decades ago, 27 years ago to be exact.
Oh, wow.
Back in May 1981, two young hikers, Laura Susan Ramsay, who was 27 years old, and Robert Mountford Jr., also 27, had been camping on the same exact stretch of Appalachian Trail, just miles from where Sean and Scott were ambushed. Laura and Robert weren't just hikers, actually, they were social workers. Social workers. I say that with a weird voice. They were social workers from Maine, part of a church outreach mission. They had actually taken time off to hike the Appalachian Trail. I think, if I remember correctly, Robert actually took like 4 months off of work or some like extreme amount of time to hike this trail, whereas Laura took 2 weeks off to join in for just a portion of it. But either way, they had taken time off to hike this trail and to raise funds for a school for mentally challenged children in Maine, which was run by Mumford's mother. So they were doing out for a good cause. And like some people reported that they were handing out like Christian literature as they went. Either way, they were kind of like on a mission while they were hyping the Appalachian Trail. One day, they disappeared. A search was launched after their friends reported them missing. Eventually, their tents and belongings were found abandoned near the Wapiti shelter. Their bodies were discovered days later, dumped off a steep embankment. Robert had been shot in the face 3 times, while Laura had been beaten and stabbed repeatedly. Her injuries were brutal overkill. For weeks, the case sat cold until someone came forward. A man who said his friend, Randall Lee Smith, had come back from the woods acting strange with scratches on his arms. Police brought Randall in. He denied everything. This is actually the weirdest thing. This Randall guy, he gets brought in for questioning. He says he doesn't remember who he is. He doesn't remember who his mom is. He had
The
claimed
heck?
complete memory loss.
That's weird.
This led the judge to obviously order an evaluation, rightfully so. And so the psychological evaluation conducted at Western State Hospital concluded that Randall was faking amnesia and that the psychiatrist determined that his memory loss was selective and self serving, and that his reports of hallucinations and delusions were likely fabricated.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know if I've heard many stories of people just claiming that they have complete memory loss all of a sudden.
Yeah. Kind of smart.
I mean, I suppose, but then
If
you
they
have a
actually
psych
could figure it out.
evaluation and they're like, liar.
Yeah, true.
But also, I don't know how psychiatrists work. I'm like, how can you tell that this is like self-serving?
Yeah. I bet like you can just like watch him and be like, you remember something that happened around the same time and wasn't part of the case. Just like on he like forgot to like
Accidentally says his dog's name or something. Like, wait, you
yeah,
remembered?
yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, seriously. They obviously probably have certain tests and different things. Maybe something neurological. Maybe they could do something with like a scan. I'm not quite sure. But regardless, they called him out and he was like, okay, you're right. I don't have memory loss.
Got
Interesting
me.
man. Right. This behavior was consistent with Smith's history, Randall Smith's history of deceptive conduct, which he actually earned the nickname Lion Randall among locals. So he's known to
Oh,
lie. He's
lying
known
Randall. I heard lion.
Lion. I
Lion
know
Randall.
Lyin, Lion
Yeah.
Randall among locals, which coincides with his behavior 27 years later when he introduced himself to two unassuming fishermen by the name Ricky Williams. So we have Randall and Ricky, same person, a big liar. In this 1981 case that we mentioned with Robert Mumford Jr. and Laura Susan Ramsay, the prosecution presented several pieces of circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime. Randall, Ricky, I'm calling Randall from here on out because that's his actual name.
Yeah.
So this was difficult because most of the evidence was circumstantial. At the time, we're in the early 80s. We don't have forensics as we do today. So a lot of these things were going to be difficult to hold up in court. So there's 5 main pieces of evidence that they have against Randall in the 1981 case. One being a bloody fingerprint on Laura's paperback book. So this was a pivotal piece of evidence because the fingerprint matched Randall's, whose print were on file from a previous employment at Norfolk's shipyards. This discovery was instrumental, obviously, in identifying Randall's identity.
Hmm.
And that's a fingerprint, not blood DNA. So we don't know whose blood, but we know that his fingerprint was left at the scene. There was also blood evidence at the shelter. So investigators discovered blood between the floorboards of the Wapiti shelter, which was later confirmed to be Mountford's. And this indicated that the murders occurred at the shelter because they were thinking that maybe it happened somewhere else and they were placed, but this puts Randall at the location.
Hmm.
There was also possession of the victim's belongings in Randall's house. Okay. I feel like
That's
this is like
creepy.
obvious. I'm like, things like this should be open and shut.
It's
But
like,
on a search of his residence, they found blood soaked jeans and other items belonging to the victims. For me, open and shut. But I
mm,
know that's not how it works in the real world in the court cases.
mm,
Along with this, Smith had actually removed trail logbooks from multiple stops along the Appalachian Trail. They assume that this is so that they can't put his name along with the victims at the same place at the same time, which I'm also like, Randall, why are you checking into every single shelter? But he went back, took these logbooks, and they think that shows guilt.
yeah.
And then the last one is that there was reports of him having suspicious behavior and statements. So there are witnesses saying that Randall was near the Appalachian Trail during the time frame and that he was acting strangely. In addition to that, he may have made statements to others suggesting that he had knowledge of the crime before it was publicly known, which
Mm,
is another thing that we've talked about in the past. What is with people talking about murders,
hmm.
like implementing themselves.
Yeah.
So these are the five big things that they're going to take Randall to court for the 1981 murders of Robert Mountford and Laura Susan Ramsay.
Hmm.
Despite the strength of the circumstantial evidence, prosecutors were concerned about securing a conviction without a clear motive or direct eyewitnesses. Because of this, the legal team actually cut a deal with the prosecutors. And
Uh-oh.
in 1982, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. Because of this, he avoided the death penalty. The public assumed that he had been locked away for life. I mean, a cold blood murder of two innocent 27-year-olds, you would
Yeah.
think that that would be the outcome. However,
Not so
it,
fast.
right, it wasn't the case.
Yeah.
After serving 15 years of his 30-year sentence, Randall Lee Smith was paroled in 1996. Then he vanished. Reports say that he went to live with his mom up until she passed away, and then he took over her house. But it sounds like he kept himself. No one really knew where Randall went. A lot of people didn't even know that he was actually released from jail because he laid low, kept himself. I mean, I guess that makes sense. If he stays in the same town, he probably doesn't really want to show his face.
Yeah.
That is up until 2008 when two strangers welcomed a quiet man named Ricky to their campsite on the very same trail where he had killed years before. When authorities confirmed the 2008 shooter was Randall Lee Smith, it sent a ripple of disbelief through the region. Now, 27 years after he murdered two young hikers, he had returned to the same exact woods and nearly, almost intentionally tried to kill two more men. The parallels were too precise to ignore. Same trail, same area, same type of victims, young, trusting hikers who welcomed a stranger into their camp. But
Hmm.
this time, he didn't disappear. He was in custody, arrested the same night as the attack, found stumbling along the wreckage stolen truck. At first glance, his injuries seemed minor. And so obviously, he went out to his jail cell to await further interrogation. But evidently, he had hurt his head pretty bad and had some internal trauma from the crash. But he was talking, he was coherent, he was guarded, he didn't want to say much. And the charges were filed immediately 2 counts of attempted capital murder, 2 counts of grand larceny for the stolen vehicle. Police hoped to finally get answers like why he had done this, had he planned it, all the questions that everyone has. But before any of those questions could be asked, Randall Lee Smith slash Ricky Williams died. Just 4 days after the attack, he collapsed in his jail cell. He was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead from apparent natural causes, later identified as complications from blood loss and internal injuries sustained in the crash.
Oh,
So there
wow.
was no trial, no testimony, no final confession.
That's crazy.
As for Sean and Scott, they both survived. These guys are crazy. Like head, neck, chest, back, major areas.
Hmm.
Sean's bullet wound narrowly missed vital arteries near his heart, which is actually crazy. In fact, the one that hit his chest entered between two ribs, and the muscle mass in his chest had pushed the bullet aside from his heart.
Let's go.
That is the wildest thing I've ever
Strong
heard.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy what the body does to protect itself.
Yeah.
It's incredible. He was in recovery by 4 a.m. the next day and ready for the
Jeez.
police interview. So he was like a recovery. He bounced back pretty quick.
Yeah.
As far as Scott's injuries, there wasn't as much information on it. But what we do know is that he had extensive neck surgery and he ended up didn't making a full recovery. They were the only people to ever live through an attack by Randall Lee Smith. Sean actually believes that Randall must have killed more since being released a decade earlier.
I
And the
bet.
fact that he came back and the Appalachian Trail, many people go missing on this all the time.
Yeah.
Like whether they're lost, whether it's an animal, whether it's Randall, we don't know. But what they do think is that these four weren't the only attacked by him. In interviews later, both described Ricky as off, but never outright threatening until the moment that he turned. Upon a further investigation and a deeper search of the surrounding area in the woods, they actually hit the jackpot with Randall's belongings, which only led to further questions. Among the items found were his GED certificate obtained in prison and his birth certificate that were both in a bush. They also found a copy of law enforcement radio, 10 codes, and a police scanner, a plastic molded contour map of the area that had several places marked in pencil. They could not explain the cassette tape that GCPD said contained some kind of satanic ritual, but they found a cassette tape that had him doing weird stuff on it. And
Weird.
finally, they had recovered several eyeglasses, clothes of various styles and sizes, 8 pairs of women's underwear, and they also searched the areas marked on Smith's map and could not locate anything suspicious. But it makes you wonder if Sean was right. Are the four victims the only ones that we know of, or are there more out there?
Spooky.
Yeah, there's something almost sacred about the Appalachian Trail, as everyone says. For many, it's a place of peace, of solitude, of healing. But for those who know the story of Randall Lee Smith, the trail doesn't feel quite the same. It doesn't matter that the crimes were years ago or that the killer is gone now. What lingers is the pattern. The fact that a man could come and kill two hikers, walk free, basically, and then 2 decades later come back unnoticed, unchecked, and nearly do it again.
Yeah.
That realization like rattles the hiking community. And a lot of them talk about still like hikers' scary stories, like campfire stories about a man in the woods, about campers disappearing without a trace, about walking through the stretch of Virginia with one eye over their shoulder. Because maybe it wasn't just the murders, maybe it was what they symbolized. That evil doesn't always storm in. Sometimes it sits by a fire, makes small talk, and waits for the lights to go out. And that is our case of the man in the woods.
Oh, dang. That was scary.
Spooky, scary story.
Yeah.
I hate that story in terms of like, I already am nervous to camp
Yeah.
because of wildlife. And then you put on top that there's just bad guys out there wanting to do bad things.
Yeah. It's probably the best place to do stuff because it's hard to get caught.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Do you have any not so fun facts for us before we wrap up?
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about the Appalachian Trail. Over 3 million people visit the Appalachian Trail each year.
Wow. 3
and
million?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And it runs through 14 states that stretch over 2,190 miles.
Huge.
Since 1974, there's been 14 documented murders, but there is probably a lot more missing people. Less than 1% of hikers report violent experiences, violent crimes. And
Okay,
so,
that makes me feel better.
yeah, it's a safe place, but bad things happen because
And the
you get a lot of people in the same spot, bad things happen. So,
and of course those are the stories you're gonna hear. You're not gonna hear about like the peaceful hike.
yeah, exactly. So, those are the Chat GPT not so fun facts today.
Today was actually better. A little bit more fun fact than not so fun fact.
Yeah,
Less centered on death. So I like that.
yeah, true.
We'll see. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in for this week's episode of Siblings in Crime. We'll be back next week with another.
Yes, bye.